Come, all you moonshiners, if you want to hear about the kind of booze that the serve around
Welcome
here.
back to Barley and Hops. I'm George. For those of you who recognize me, if you get an opportunity, like the video, share it with your friends, of course, and if you do get an opportunity, please subscribe. That really helps. And also, your comments are so well welcomed. It only helps us get better at what we do so we can serve you, the community, just that much better. So today we've got a really good treat for you. We're going to run the Brew House 8-gallon pot still, but we're going to run the 3-inch column as opposed to the 2-inch column, which we've done before. We're going to show you what the difference is, and I'm going to spend some time trying to explain some aspects, because this is where art and science kind of meet together, and you get to produce a really, really nice product. Now, as always, I'm going to keep this relatively basic. So we're going to do it like you normally would do it in your home or your backyard or your garage or your man cave or wherever it is you're going to do it. The advanced portions of the process we're going to save for later on because we want to make sure we get this right first before we go any further and we delve into some specialties. So without further ado, let's get to this. This is the 8-gallon still from Brew House. And with Brew House, everything comes with it, all your hose hookups, your water pump, your diffuser plate, if you're going to use propane. I prefer to use electric now that we've got PID controllers available, and we'll get to that in a moment. But in this particular case, we've got the 3-inch combination pot reflux, which means that we've got a reflux portion, and I'll explain these hoses in a moment, but it's got the cross tubes for your pre-condensing chamber or your defleglimator, whatever you want to call it. Then it's got the additional column with the spout on here. That's called a Liebig condenser, but it looks so much like a shotgun. I sometimes refer to it as a shotgun condenser as well. That has no bit. Look, this model is considered the Gin series. So it's the PS2 3-inch Gin series model. They're a little bit more expensive, a little bit more pricey, but it's worth it if you're looking into making things like gin, or if you want to make a coffee whiskey or coffee distillate or any other kind of flavored distillates, because this gin basket, you see it's got a screen in the bottom, and what you do is you put in whatever medium you want to put in there, and that would go right before the condenser portion that's attached to the top of this. Or if you're going to run it by a reflux, I would place this here, and that would go actually in the middle, because the gin basket would go on top of this bottom column. Now, keep in mind that all of this put together, if it was put together just like this now with a gin basket, it's going to probably be about 70 inches or so from the bottom to the very top. So you're going to need some space to operate this in. I've got this on a table right now, but later on when we start getting ready to run this, we're going to move it down so that we've got some room to work with. If you get the 13-gallon pot, because it does come with a 13-gallon kettle, and it's not much more expensive. It just takes a little bit more energy to heat, of course, because you got more mass. But if you get that, just keep in mind that you're now going to be running about 80 to 85 inches from bottom to top. So whatever heat medium you're using to place this on needs to be as low as possible, of course, with enough ventilation if you're using flame, or a way to operate that electrically if you're also going to use electric. So just keep that in mind, because these things can become very tall. What we'll do today is we're not going to run the reflux portion, but if you did run the reflux, keep this in mind. If you did run the reflux, and I've got this already wired up, well, hosed up, because your reflux goes in the bottom and comes out the top. So you see you've got those cross tubes in there. Now they don't meet each other except for on the outsides here. So what we do is we run from one bottom here, and we run it around, run it to the middle on this side, and then we go out this side and run it into the top, this back side, run it out that side, and then that runs right back around to the top tube. Now I hope that makes sense, because it's really not that difficult when you think about it. But just keep in mind that you use the lowest portion, or the lowest pipe that comes out. That's this one. And that's where your water goes. You'll trickle the water in, and it'll run around, and it runs across those tubes, and it comes out the top. And then, of course, there's a little valve that comes with it. So if you get that the reflow, all these hoses, all the valves, and all the controls come with it. So it's really, really simple. But let's get the basics done first before we go into trying to do a reflux, because a reflux is going to do a lot of work to strip a lot of flavor. Now, the benefit of stripping all the flavor out of it is you have a pure neutral spirit, but you have a really, really high proof. Somewhere in the range of 180 to 190 proof. When we disassociate ourselves from a reflux and we're going to run a pot still, of course we maintain a lot of those flavors, but the cost in maintaining those flavors is the drop in proof. But really, when you think about it, that doesn't matter. You're going to come, a good pot still will run anywhere between 130 and 160. It'll usually start off about 160, and then it'll progressively start to drop as, the volume in your kettle changes. But that's quite all right. But just remember, if you're going to collect 180 proof, and let's say just for sake of argument, there's 2 quarts in your still, and there's usually more, but there's 2 quarts in your still of 180 proof, well, you're going to get like 2.5 quarts maybe of 160 proof. You see, so you're not losing the alcohol, it's just you're losing the strength of the alcohol. The volume is still there, but it'll be translated into a little bit more with the lower the proof. I hope that makes sense. So don't think you're losing alcohol or gaining alcohol by running a reflux. Nothing could be further from the truth. You don't increase alcohol, it's already there. All we're going to do is separate it. All right, let me set this aside because we're not going to use that today. And we're also not going to use the gin basket because I want to keep this simple and we're going to go right at it. What I do want to show you though is one addition to this is the PARROT. And the PARROT is a really neat thing to have. It's not necessary, but it really it shoots your cool points way up when your friends come over. What you do is you run the hose here from the end of the Liebig condenser, goes in here, there's a little breather hole, and then you drop your alcoholometer right down here in the center, very carefully because it'll break if you just drop it, very carefully. And then this will fill up with your spirit, and then it'll run out the end, and another little hose goes into your collection jar. But the good thing about this is that the entire time that your still is running, you'll always know exactly that point in time what the proof of your spirits are. And it really helps you keep track of getting rid of the heads, really isolating those hearts, and then separating the tails. I use the nose for my tails. Also, this is my indicator. When I get around 90, about 90 proof coming out is when I really start watching it, and I'll start to smell. And when you get that raunchy smell, you know you're starting to hit your tails. So, and I usually cut off at about 90, somewhere around there, because I just don't want to spoil a good run. Collecting tails for me is almost, you can do that, but it's almost counterproductive because there's still a lot of energy and a lot of effort that goes into it, and you're not going to consume those. Yes, you can use them to spike your next batch, but I'm of the mind of why put stuff that I won't consume in the next batch in order, you follow that train of thought? But it'll work, it's no problem. All right, so we're going to use that. And then for those of you who are concerned about copper, I've got this roll of copper, and it comes with it, so this is all inclusive. I'll roll off some copper and I'll show you that when we put it together and get it going. I'm going to put this into the column. Now, as far as George is concerned, you can use copper or you can skip it. I have found no empirical data that proves either way, whether it's a necessity or it's counter useful. But people, if it makes you happy, put it in there. Like I always say, if it makes you happy, do it, and do it as much as you possibly can. But I'm going to put some in there just for the sake of argument, because I'll usually get comments like, where's the copper in your system? I normally run it without copper. All right, and then last but not least, it comes with a water pump. Now this is really, really great. The water pump, I just use a cooler, a 62 quart cooler. I put some ice in there, about 10, 20 pounds of ice, fill it up with water. I drop the water pump in. I run the hose from here to the bottom of the Liebig condenser. And then the out hose comes from the top. It goes right back in that cooler. And the only thing the ice does is preserves the water. It doesn't do anything in specific except because the hot water is coming out of the top of that condenser. It will eventually warm that water up. And then all you do is let a little bit run out and throw another bag of ice in there. And I can usually do a run with about 20, 25 pounds of ice. So just make sure, this comes with it, and this is really, really neat to have because you just plug it in and let it go. Now, if by chance you don't have one of these, and you run down to your local store and you pick up one of them pond pumps, one of them small ones, and they run about $9 to $13, and they're not really that expensive. You can get them at Home Depot, Lowe's, I think you can get them at Walmart too. And you use that. Now, remember, the smaller pump doesn't push as much pressure, so don't be worried. If you put it in your bucket and the water won't make its way up to the top of your column, well, that's just because it's not rated to push water at that level. They'll be rated at 2 feet, 4 feet, 18 feet, whatever the case may be. Well, if that's the case and it's not pushing it all the way up, well, let's do the simple thing. Just move your water up. And then let's pump, instead of trying to pump from here, way up here, why don't we just pump from here straight across? It'll work that way because it will push water. All right, so we've come to the point now to where I'm going to take this thing. Oh, what I didn't explain to you, what I need to real quick is this 1500 heat band I've got on the outside. We've left this on here. It just stays on there all the time now. And I'll use that, but at the same time, I've got the 1500 watt heater element that's inside. And it's inside this thing, and you'll see that. You see that 1500 watt heater element's in there. And what I'll do in the very beginning is I'll isolate the 2 circuits that I'm going to use. I'll use one circuit for my 1500 watt heater element that's inside the keg, and I'll run that off my PID. But this is the band heater, and it's a 1500 watt band heater, and I'll plug this into the other circuit, and the only purpose behind that is to try to heat this up in a reasonable amount of time. It should take me about, with both of these on there, it'll take me about 15 or 20 minutes to get it up to temperature. Without that, it'll probably take 25 or 30 minutes, but the point is it's already there, so I might as well use it. It's not absolutely necessary, but if you want one, just call Ray and get one. But in the meantime, just one element will do on an 8-gallon still. If you have a 2000 watt heater element, it works just a little bit quicker. So keep that in mind, and make sure you check out our other videos on selecting heater elements, doing the math, isolating circuits, just to make sure you're safe and you're always successful the first time through. We don't need to learn from our mistakes when you've got folks like me who will make them for you and share. So keep that in mind, and we'll be back shortly. And the next time when you come back, I'll have this thing lowered, and I'll have a few more things out here. We'll discuss that as we get it heated up and we get things get started, okay? Thanks. Happy distilling. Well, one thing we didn't show you at the beginning, and we're working on this right now. I'm about 30% finished. I've already siphoned my mash into my kettle, and I got one of these, the heater band plugged in, because I'm starting to heat it up. I'm just trying to get ahead of myself. So, but the PID that I'm going to use. Now, most of you may say, well, George, you've got all of that stuff. No wonder it's easy for you. Well, I'm showing you how easy it can be if just throw something together, but make sure you do it right. And I've taken the most rudimentary means possible to put a PID. I just got a small block of wood, and you'll see I got my receptacle here, and I've got my solid state relay, and I've got the PID on some extended wires, and it sits out free. And I've also got my temperature probe inside my bung already that goes in top the column. So I can use this. I'll just set this on the floor, and I'll have this sitting somewhere where I can continue to change the temperature if necessary, or just let this thing operate and run that 1500 watt heater element and bring it up and match the temperature that I'm looking for. So that's what I'm going to do. So you can see you don't have to have the box, the fan, and all the bells and whistles and the on-off switch. This, I just plug it in or unplug it. You make it as simple as possible, because what we're really going to do is we're going to work on the process as opposed to all the elements in the outside associated parts and pieces. You see, because remember, distilling, it's like a 3-legged stool. You've got ingredients, you got process, and you got equipment. And as long as you have those 3 matched, everything should work out right. But when you cheat on one of those, it's going to fall over. So if you got the best equipment in the world and you know exactly what you're doing and you've done this 100 times, you got the process right, and you use cheap ingredients, well, you're going to wind up with a cheap distillate. The same goes for if you got the greatest ingredients in the world and the best equipment, and you have no clue about what's going on, you're going to cheat yourself in the long run. So you see what I'm talking about? That three-legged stool. It's really simple. So let's just balance all of this, and we got to get back to work. I'll be back with you shortly as soon as I get everything else put together. We'll catch up.